Roman Abramovich is worth an estimated $12.2 billion and was once the wealthiest man in Russia. But what's his story? Where's his wealth come from? How did a poor orphan from Siberia go on to become one of the most famous Russian oligarchs? The thing is, the general lack of information about this man is no accident. He's quiet, and probably for good reason. Now, before I get to the controversies, let's take a look at where he came from. Born in a small Siberian village in 1966, Abramovich lost both of his parents by the age of 3. His mother died of blood poisoning when he was 1. His father died in a construction accident not long after. And so, Roman was raised by relatives. First his uncle, who lived just south of the Arctic Circle, and then his grandmother. And of course, if you know anything about Siberia, you know it's a really hostile environment. Winter temperatures range from -10 to -50 Fahrenheit. Infrastructure is limited, and there's parts of Siberia that remain in darkness for months at a time. And it must have been especially tough given the fact that Abramovich's family were newcomers to the region, having originally come from Lithuania. It's safe to say they didn't go to Siberia by choice. In 1940, the Soviet Union annexed Lithuania, and under orders of the dictator Joseph Stalin, Abramovich's grandparents were rounded up and deported along with thousands of others. The truth was, Stalin used Siberia as a dumping ground for anyone he saw as a possible threat. And that was a very wide audience, anyone from entrepreneurs to students, even priests from the churches. And the Abramoviches were just one family amongst many who were caught up in that operation. This was the backdrop for Abramovich's early life, and it shows just how far he's been able to rise. But how did he do it? Well, friends say he was a natural entrepreneur. For example, rumor has it that while serving in the Soviet army as a 20-year-old, he talked drivers into giving him gasoline in exchange for candy or baked goods. He was apparently able to convince drivers to siphon gas from their army vehicles, taking small amounts in order to avoid detection. Those drivers would then leave the stolen gas in containers in the woods. And get this, when Abramovich picked up those gas canisters, he'd then turn around and sell them back to the army at a huge discount. And of course, it made him a hefty profit while also providing his superiors with cheap gas, in turn also making him a favourite with his commanding officers. Now, if those stories are true, it shows just how much of a risk Roman Abramovich was willing to take, and it also shows just how resourceful he was even at a young age. That resourcefulness would serve him well in the confused world of post-Soviet Russia. When the Soviet Union suddenly collapsed in 1991, it left the nation with huge uncertainty. You see, Russia had been communist for so long that it was very difficult to know what would happen next. And it didn't take long for entrepreneurs such as Abramovich to swoop in and build whatever they could from the remains of the old communist state. Formerly state-owned companies in gas, mining and metal industries were privatised and auctioned off at basement prices. Businessmen, eager to get a slice of those lucrative resources, fought tooth and nail for control. There were many deaths. For example, at least 100 people were killed in the rivalries and battles to gain control over the country's aluminium smelting operations. That included journalists and bankers. In fact, Abramovich himself once admitted, quote, "Every 3 days someone was murdered in that business." Now, Abramovich kept a relatively low profile, and he was able to get through those turbulent 90s unscathed. But he must have been very good at networking, because he became a kind of protege to a powerful oligarch named Boris Berezovsky. Many believe that it was this relationship with Berezovsky that actually saved Abramovich from being a target. Eventually, Berezovsky made Abramovich part of the board of directors for his giant oil company Sibneft, one of the state-owned companies that had gone up for sale after the Soviet collapse. And with those Sibneft shares, Abramovich started to become a very wealthy man. As he entered the 2000s, even as other oligarchs around him fell, Abramovich's star continued to rise. His own mentor, Boris Berezovsky, was forced to leave Russia for good after criticising Putin's leadership. No one was safe. Even the once richest man in Russia, Khodorkovsky, was sent to prison where he ended up serving 8 years. But Fortunately for Abramovich, Berezovsky wasn't the only powerful Russian that he befriended. His guardian angel was none other than Vladimir Putin, who by the early 2000s was rapidly amassing political power. And in the year 2000, while Putin was cracking down on so-called corruption, Abramovich was allowed to create Russal, an aluminium monopoly. When he sold his shares in Sibneft back to the Russian government in 2005, his fortune nearly doubled. By 2008, Abramovich had an estimated net worth of $23.5 billion. So what kind of deals did Abramovich make to keep the Kremlin off his back? Well, in 2008, he did admit to paying billions to oligarchs like Berezovsky in exchange for political favours and access to those lucrative state-owned industries. How much more corruption was he involved in? We'll probably never know, but suffice to say, both Abramovich and his mentor figures were all involved in a murky world. Now, despite his secretive past, it does seem like he's at least made some effort to give back to the country that made him so fabulously wealthy. From 2001 to 2008, he served as the governor of Chatotka, a remote Siberian province in Russia's far northeastern corner. The economy there had been left in ruins after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and when all of the mining industries were shut down, residents sank into abject poverty. But Abramovich decided to do something to help. He funneled over $1 billion of his own money into development projects. That money went towards new schools, new infrastructure, and even an annual vacation to a warm place for every child in the region. According to his office's own accounts, life expectancy has increased by 3 years and birth rates shot way up. But Abramovich didn't receive international notoriety until he became involved with another of his passions. And no, I'm not talking super yachts, which by the way I cover in this video here. No, what I'm talking about is English football. In a move that was met with mixed reactions by Russians and English football fans alike, Roman purchased Chelsea Football Club in 2003, and with his particular entrepreneurial approach, he transformed it into the success that it is today. He was prepared to spend big and sack ruthlessly. Even at the slightest sign of a dip in form, Roman was prepared to sack managers and sell players. But these high standards completely transformed Chelsea's history, to the extent that today they've won every single major trophy that it's possible for them to win. 2 Champions Leagues, the Premier League, the FA Cup 5 times, the Europa League twice, the League Cup 3 times. I mean, the list just goes on, and no Chelsea fan prior to Abramovich could have ever dreamt of this in a million years. Of course, the entire time that Abramovich owned Chelsea, rumours were rampant that the reason why he wanted such a high-profile asset was to ensure his safety by making himself a very prominent figure in the Western world, thereby making it harder for his enemies to take him out. How true those rumours are, it's difficult to say, but what we do know is Abramovich has loaned Chelsea Football Club an estimated £1.5 billion, and for better or worse, he set a trend for other overseas billionaires to get involved with the Premier League. Newcastle is now owned by a group of Saudis. Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United are all owned by American billionaires, not to mention, of course, Manchester City, who are owned by Sheikh Mansour, the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates. With all of these changes that he spearheaded, it's come as a huge shock when, at the time of recording this video, in recent days he's announced that he's looking to sell Chelsea Football Club. Why is he now looking to leave? Well, after Putin's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, British Parliament announced that in retaliation it would look to impose sanctions against Russian oligarchs who have assets in the UK. Considering his alleged ties to Putin, that apparently puts Abramovich firmly in the crosshairs. In the words of one commentator in an interview with the Guardian newspaper, quote, "You don't get to be an oligarch unless you're basically in cahoots with Putin." Now, while at the time of recording this it remains to be seen who the new buyer of Chelsea will be, it's also notable that Abramovich is also looking to apparently sell his other UK-based assets, including his £150 million mega mansion in upmarket Kensington. Speaking of the invasion of Ukraine, it seems that Abramovich has got involved in a big way. You see, he was actually part of the peace talks that occurred between Russia and Ukrainian officials a few days after the invasion began. As his spokesperson declared, quote, "He's trying to help." Now, whether his motives are moral or purely business related is hard to tell, but there's no denying that Abramovich continues to be one of the most important Russian figures today. And with all the unwanted attention that Russian oligarchs like Abramovich have got as a result of the war in Ukraine, now, perhaps more than ever, people are looking to learn exactly who Abramovich is. For the highly secretive, soft-spoken Abramovich, it's no doubt a very uncomfortable situation to be in. But for the rest of us, it's an opportunity to look beyond the headlines and finally get a glimpse into one of the world's most fascinating billionaires. Hey, if you enjoy hearing about billionaires and political intrigue, check out this story about the man they call the Warren Buffett of the Middle East, who just so happened to be arrested by his own cousin. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next video.